Okay, so one thing that I really enjoy doing that I don't get the chance to do very often is a character analysis. So that's what today's video is going to be about. Sort of. Anyway, as you can tell by the title, we'll be talking about Otto Octavius during his brief stint as Spider-Man. Just so you know, this video is going to be talking a bit about concepts, my theories on villain categorization, Otto's inherent character flaws, what makes heroes and anti-heroes what they are, etc., etc. So for this episode, I'm going to put a timestamp list in the description so that you can fast forward or go back to something easily. I do want to get something out of the way, though. Let's talk about Dan Slott real quick. Now, I know some of you are probably wringing your hands and laughing, thinking, oh man, Mike is going to totally go ham on him like he did to America Chavez's writer. Sorry, I'm actually not. I actually think that Dan Slott's an okay writer. Beyond that, I think that some of his ideas are pretty cool. I'm glad that he brought Eddie Brock back out of the obscurity that Mark Millar tried to leave him in. I'm glad he's able to write villains to where they don't come across like a joke. I even like the idea of using Superior Spider-Man to end where it can put Peter Parker in a place where he can move internationally, allowing the character of Miles Morales to have a role in Marvel that doesn't clash with Peter Parker. That way fans of both characters can really enjoy both books. Or either or, depending on where you want to put your money. With that said, when I dug through a few interviews with Dan Slott on Superior Spider-Man, I couldn't really find out what his major creative direction was. It seemed like he just felt like playing with the concept to see where it led. Basically, what happens when a megalomaniacal villain tries to become a hero? Personally, I think the concept's intriguing, but sometimes I wish it hadn't been done with Spider-Man. Still, the reason that I wanted to do this video is because I was watching Rob over at Comics Explained talk about it, and this video is also sort of a response to something that he had mentioned. I completely disagree with the idea that Doc Ock was a better hero than Spider-Man. In fact, he wasn't a hero at all. He was still a villain. Now, before I get into talking about what happened within Superior Spider-Man, I feel like we need to get some definitions in. What makes a hero, an anti-hero, and a villain? Also, since the heroes that I'm discussing today are almost exclusively American, whenever I talk government, that's the perspective I'm coming from. At the end of the day, the two major factors are motivation and action. What do people do, and why do people do what they do? Superheroes save people, and are generally selfless to degrees. They're willing to self-sacrifice, but may have other motivations. Iron Man and the Human Torch are thrill-seekers. Spider-Man and Captain America are duty-bound, so on and so forth. However, one thing that also makes a hero is respect of civil rights and the justice system. A lot of people think that killing is simply what makes an anti-hero an anti-hero. Not really the case. The act of killing someone isn't inherently good or inherently evil. Context matters. For example, at the end of the amazing Extremis arc in Iron Man, Tony ends up killing Malin, the white supremacist, alt-rightish domestic terrorist who used the Extremis virus before Tony did. He does so in self-defense. According to the law, it's not murder. Rather, what heroes do and anti-heroes don't do is respect the justice system. A hero goes out of his way to preserve life if he can, so that someone can be either tried in a court or rehabilitated. An anti-hero cuts out the middleman and acts as judge, jury, and executioner, but they do have a similar moral code to a hero. An anti-hero often thinks that punishment fits a crime, and they're there to dole out punishment. Basically, you don't see Frank Castle or Eddie Brock killing someone for jaywalking. I could go a little further in depth on this, but I actually think that it's better for you to see the clash of those ideas in action. So what I would recommend doing is checking out the third issue of the arc Welcome Back Frank in The Punisher, which is written by Garth Ennis and drawn by Steve Dillon, so everybody only has one face. Or you can have a look at Daredevil Season 2 on Netflix, where the Punisher and Daredevil have a heart-to-heartish conversation about the two ideologies. Now both are wonderfully done, but I prefer the version in the Netflix series because John Bernthal as the Punisher is amazing, as is Charlie Cox as Daredevil, and their conversation really gives you a good idea of what the mindset of an anti-hero like Frank Castle is. The point is that both heroes and anti-heroes do have one thing in common, and that's respect for the life, livelihood, and day-to-day existence of civilians. You see, that's part of the reason that Civil War and Civil War II are, in concept, interesting. Now granted, the execution is a completely different discussion, but both stories introduce an utterly villainous idea to the world of heroes that divides that community in two. The first introduces the Superhuman Registration Act, which the government in Marvel had tried to do to mutants for ages. It's an utterly despicable idea, forcing people to register just because they're different. It brings back recollection of Jim Crow, for example. The second introduces the idea of using an Inhuman who has the ability to see the future, or rather, probabilities of the future, to establish pre-crime arrests. Now, of course, what this would do is you would end up quarantining and arresting people for things that they haven't even done yet, which, again, morally repugnant and against civil rights. It's something that a hero or an anti-hero really wouldn't do in normal day-to-day action, but it's a tempting thought because, let's face it, it makes their jobs easier. Or in the case of Civil War I, and by extension Captain America Civil War, keeps people, quote-unquote, safer, but exchanges liberty for safety. And as Benjamin Franklin said, if you exchange liberty for safety, you will get neither and deserve neither. So basically, both ideas, quite frankly, are morally repugnant. And in both series, we see established characters almost become villainous. Because, well, once you go down that dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. Iron Man, Hank Pym, and Reed Richards make some moves that would make Doctor Doom nod in approval. In Civil War II, Carol Danvers and Black Panther, in a move that was ridiculously out of character for both of them, they come across like fucking Nazis. The Red Skull would be like, "That's a good one. I'm going to use that idea next time." You see, it's in Superior Spider-Man that we see Otto Octavius cross that line more than once. He sets up what may as well be a surveillance state in New York with his spider bots. Why? Not really for safety, but it's because he's lazy. And he doesn't give a shit about anyone but Otto. You know, he thinks, oh, this gives me time to date. Oh, this gives me time to get Peter Parker his doctorate so he gets more respect. Ugh. On top of that, he revels in the fact that he has that in Superior Spider-Man Annual Number 1, and the possibility of revenge when Blackout kidnaps Aunt May and he's tracking them down. Speaking of which, he tortures Blackout, as in pure sadism, as in Batman would tell him to stop, as in he impales him on meat hooks, rips out all of his fingernails and teeth for the sake of science, as he's still conscious. On top of that, he flat out executes someone after disarming them, as in the type of execution that you see in the "I work for Oskar Schindler" list from Schindler's List. No, I'm not going to finish with the Nazi comparisons. There's a reason that SS Man is one of Otto's nicknames in this fucking book. He beats people near death more than once. He got so extreme that the Avengers wanted to capture him and hand him to the cops more than once. He conducted illegal experiments. He stole the Venom symbiote from Flash Thompson in the pursuit of gaining more power. He created a private army and didn't give two shits when Carnage was carving them up. The fact of the matter is that Otto Octavius really didn't give a damn about anyone but himself and the people close to him. The only person I can say that actually liked him more during the series, after taking over Peter's body, was Anna Maria Marconi. Well, congratulations, Otto. You fucked a midget. Whoop-de-fucking-do. What you also tried to do was turn New York into fucking Latveria. Whew. Got a little heated there. Sorry. Comic books is serious business. Okay, so one thing that I have to mention is that Otto is coming into this with a big issue. And this is why he fails at the end. There's a line from the movie The Silence of the Lambs, where Hannibal Lecter suggests to Clarice Starling that monsters aren't born. They're made through years of systematic abuse. Psychologically speaking, that's true in a great many cases. If you're ever interested in serial killers, one thing that I would do is go listen to a Jordan Peterson lecture on them, or pick up a book called Pan's Ram that goes over a man named Pan's Ram who was a serial rapist and serial killer who wanted to start a world war. Yeah, kind of screwed up in the head. Anyway, Otto Octavius, when the die was cast for his life, nyuk nyuk, he rolled snake eyes. His mother was overbearing and way too protective. Wouldn't even let him date. His father? An abusive prick. He was teased and bullied throughout school. And even though he was a genius, even though he always had his escape to science, he always had an inferiority complex. He screwed up and thus ended up getting octopus arms attached to himself permanently. And on top of that, with Peter Parker mocking him every time he beat the crap out of him, it just brought back up all those failures that he had in his life. It brought back up the abuse of his father, so on and so forth. He grew up without any love. And thus, he never really had anything in his life to heal those wounds. Only more and more stuff to bury it with. It's hard to not feel sorry for the guy. At the end, he was consumed with defeating Spider-Man, and in this case, consumed with being superior to him, or rather, in his eyes, what would make him superior to him. And since he really didn't get any chance to psychologically heal, he was doomed to fail. Then again, this is the conclusion that Otto comes to when Peter gets back his body in Superior Spider-Man issue 30. Now, I have to admit something. Superior Spider-Man is a good series. Now, put away the hammer and the nails, you can crucify me later. It's a good series if you take it as a concept experiment. Like I mentioned earlier, what happens when you take someone like Otto Octavius, a megalomaniac who possesses a genius intellect, but is also narcissistic and apathetic towards humanity, and have him try to be a hero? Now, of the two archetypes of villainy out there, Otto would fit into one that could be, well, heroic as time went on. You can kind of see that they're doing something similar with Doctor Doom right now in infamous Iron Man. There are two types of villains, megalomaniacs and psychopaths. Megalomaniacs really are redeemable in a lot of ways, and Otto could have been. You see shades of it here. With time. The thing is, without that time, there's no way that he could be. On top of that, he really didn't try to change as a person, and thus was just a villain in a really stylish costume. In the end, he has to acquiesce to Peter Parker in his mindscape that Peter is the superior hero, the superior Spider-Man. Now, it's a logical conclusion to the series because it's Otto's various character flaws and villainy that do him in. The good that came of it is that Peter is now Dr. Peter Parker, and he's a millionaire whose company is now in direct competition to one Tony Stark. So in short, the cool thing about all this is I got to do an interesting video on hero concepts, on top of respond to a video creator that I really enjoy, plus get to sort of psychoanalyze one of the most famous villains of all time in Dr. Octopus. I'm actually really happy that he was brought back in a new body, and is now calling himself the Superior Octopus. Reason being is I'm hoping that we'll get the chance to see Dan Slott toy with the idea that Otto goes back and tries to get back with Anna Maria Marconi, who admittedly is a good character, and see what Dan can do with the character given more time. You gotta keep in mind that Superior Spider-Man was cut short because of the release of the film Amazing Spider-Man 2. Anyway, let's go ahead and draw this to a close. My conclusion is that Otto Octavius was basically a villain trying to be his version of a hero, and he failed because he had no clue how to do it, no respect for people's civil liberties, or just their rights in general, and was simply too mentally broken to turn away from villainous means without any healing first. And thus, we find out that Peter Parker is truly the Superior Spider-Man. Alright, folks. If you enjoyed the video, stick around at the end because there will be some suggestions for you at the little doodly thing that goes on after I stop talking. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. My name is Micah Curtis, and I'll see you next time. Deus Volt.